Is your life shrouded in fear? Does fear get in the way of you living life in the way that you are meant to be living it? If so, this spiritual psychologist episode is for you. I am talking to Ben, the fear guy. He is a fear alchemist and intuitive guide rooted in love and the superpower of belief in himself and others. Ben is a testament of what possibilities arise when you love and trust your inner knowing. This is a powerful episode and you are going to get so much from it. I share with some of my own vulnerability as well in this episode, so I hope that you receive so much out of it. So welcome, Ben, the fear guy. I'm really looking forward to talking all about fear. I'd love to know, first off, where has your journey started? Like, why is it? There's obviously a reason behind anybody that is doing any kind of work that they're doing, where they're guiding people to heal, to feel empowered, and to step into their purpose, their vision, all of those things. They always come from somewhere, they usually come from the place of the thing that they're talking about. So I would love to hear about your journey with fear and where it kind of, where it started, how you overcame it, how you continue to overcome it in your life, in your business. And just want to hear
So
what you
all
have to say.
things.
All everything.
Cool, Rathika. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it first and foremost. And I imagine for your viewers and listeners, if they're not familiar, maybe they've heard the word, like dharma, or you could say purpose, or you could say gift. Something you came here to do on earth, that it's your gift, it's your purpose. And as of right now, of course, mine's always evolving, but in this, moment and expression and season, it's definitely fear. And why I say that in that way is because like there's definitely a story behind it, but at the same time, it's something that I've always been curious about, even if I didn't consciously know it.
Mm.
And so for me, like, and I believe that everybody has this, we just might not remember, or we might be, suppressing it, or we might be afraid of bringing it up and remembering. But for me, it was definitely like I was always like, even as a little kid, like drawn to, I think at first I probably related to being just like a good kid, you know, being
Yes.
pure, obeying. And then I was like, I wanted to be great. And then it just kind of like evolved into, um, like, so I've always felt something like inside of me that was like, I guess like what I'm visualizing right now is almost like a little ember. Um, and then it's feeding that fire and like fanning that fire and growing it and expanding it to, the flame and or furnace that it is now. And so
Mm.
like where that really, started is I got really passionate about hip hop music
Mm-hmm.
when I was in high school. And I actually like in my teens and early mid 20s, I actually um did some really cool things with hip hop. That's a side story, but it's
Hold on, what
definitely
kind of hip hop are we talking? Like 90s? Is this like
it's like a
90s hip hop,
well, it was a
2000s hip
mix.
hop? Okay.
It was like, like think like 2013, 14 was like the height of it where we
Mm-hmm.
were doing a lot of cool things. So it was a mix of like when like it was energetic, it was positive, it was it was a mix. Yeah, it's a mix of everything. It was like a mix of 90s hip hop. It was a mix of like our producer and DJ who made all the beats and instrumentals
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of like kind of rock and alternative and electronic like influence. And so it was a kind of a mix of everything. And then being where we're from, like growing up in a, conservative city, it was like the sound sometimes was like aggressive, but it had this like loving tone to it because we weren't like you know, saying the typical like when people think of hip hop, right? Like about drugs, women, money, or
Mm.
whatever. Sometimes we actually poked fun at those things, but it was more just like fun and like honestly, like if you could bottle what we were talking about is essentially just like follow your dreams
Mm-hmm.
is what I feel like we were encouraging people to do. And which relates to that, right? Because back when I was 16 and I had just released my first CD in high school, like I was selling my CD in the hallways, at lunchtime, at sports games. And then someone approached me and said, "Hey, Ben, will you perform at one of our assemblies?" I'm not sure if they call them that everywhere, but where all the students gather
Mm-hmm.
in the auditorium for, fun things or announcements or performances or whatever. And they asked me to perform. And in that moment, I remember there were two things that I felt: absolute terror and
Mm.
complete excitement and bliss like I've never felt before. And looking back at it now, right, that was my first experience of like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is the calling, this is the thing, right? And it's whenever you feel that like terror and excitement, you know you're on the right path because you feel your
Yes.
soul calling you to be like, this is the thing. Or it could be yelling, this is the freaking thing. But then, of course, your fear, your human, your ego, your current identity, or whatever thing that feels unsafe to you is like, no, don't do that. That's scary.
Mm.
So it's polarizing. You feel both things, but that's how you usually know
Yes.
you're on the right path. And so that was my first instance with this feeling that I can, viscerally remember. And it was like I didn't have time to think. The words just came out of my mouth, which were just like, yes, I'll do
Mm-hmm.
it. And I was like, what am I doing? But I was like, I can't wait to do this. It was this both like feeling of both like feeling afraid and excited. So
Yes.
I did that and then it moved, through music was my first muse through channeling this. And then the friend that I was rapping with, who we formed a group together, he gave me a book when I turned 19. And the premise of the book essentially told me what I was feeling and doing, but it put words to the feeling, which was
Mm-hmm.
just like the secret to life is to be fearless, right? Like to
Mm-hmm.
do what you're afraid of. That's any person you look up to is like they're doing what they're afraid of.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, like I get it. I was like, I've had this feeling. Now I have the words to it. Like
Mm-hmm.
someone else is telling me. And so we actually deemed and coined ourselves fear fighters. And we actually had a song that we
Mm-hmm.
called Fear Fighters. And so we went and did everything that we're afraid of. And it turned into a habit. Like it turned into an identity. And then, a decade later is when I realized, oh, like I'm really good at this thing that not other people are really good at because one, it's in my DNA, it's in my purpose, it's in my gift, but now it's really practiced. And
Mm.
so I was like, oh, like let me just help people with this. And of course, there's a whole story to that too of like a divine synchronicity and calling and
Mm.
intuition into that. But as soon as I rebranded and pivoted everything into fear, it just like everything just snapped into place.
Mm. It's really interesting because you said at the beginning that you've always had a curiosity about it. And that's like the soul intuition calling, isn't it, from
Hmm.
such a young age? Like, why did you, out of everybody, have that real interest about fear, you know? So it's just, yeah, so interesting. And the other thing that came up when you were talking about this, like, really stepping into that fear over the 10 years. Was there ever a point where it was like you stepped into the fear, but it wasn't actually soul aligned? So it was just high risk. Do you know what I mean?
No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, for me, that's probably more financial related things, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I do view it. It's like it's both to me. Like it is soul, but at the same time, it's like I could have learned the lesson quicker than I did.
Hmm.
So the lesson kept coming around.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I finally learned it probably like a year ago. I was like, oh, okay. Like, because for me, what that lesson was like the first instance. So back in 2000, when was this? End of 2018. a lot of things happened. Like my life shifted drastically, but one of those things was I invested $40,000
Mm-hmm.
into a high risk crypto fund. And like this was one of those like soul things. Like it really was like
Mm.
this is absolutely like irresponsible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like most people would say, like, what are you doing? You know, but I just had this feeling. I was like, I'm just gonna do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like I don't do that stuff all the time, like when I see it and stuff. Um, not to say that it wasn't just, and I'll get to this part later, but like, wanting just to be like a quick fix type of thing, like
Mm-hmm.
wanting to win the lottery type of vibe.
Yes.
But it was like for me, I put the money in, and then what happened is I started to make a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I was like, oh, like if this thing just keeps going, like I'll be good for who knows how long. Like of course the
Mm-hmm.
vision is like I can make hundreds of thousands, millions, whatever. And so that is what gave me the safety to quit my 9 to 5 job. Because when I quit my 9 to 5 job, I was like, I didn't have any business revenue. I had a podcast and I had this kind of idea that I was trying to do, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I was still terrified. Like there's no like I was definitely it's the same feeling, honestly, when I felt
Mm.
asked to speak at or to perform on stage. I'm just like making a connection. Like I should probably talk about this more of like this feeling of like excitement and terror because it
Yes.
was that same thing of I remember someone I was bouncing back and forth between someone and they asked me the question, well, Ben, what would you do if it was impossible to fail? And as soon as they asked me that question, it just like hit me like a lightning bolt. And it was just so clear. I was like, oh,
Mm.
like I would quit, like without a doubt. Like it's not even a question.
Mm.
And so I knew that was my answer. Like I knew that was another like soul truth of yes, again, this is completely irresponsible. Like you're not making money in your business. You don't even know how to make money in your business really at all. But it's like, this is your feeling. Like this is your calling. And yes, it's
Mm.
absolutely terrifying. Um, and then I quit. And then about 2 or 3 months later, I learned that that $40,000 actually was gone. So it was a Ponzi scheme and it was a scam. And so that money was gone, but I still obviously made a decent amount of money. But it was scary because I'm like, oh shoot, now I'm like $40,000 in debt. Like I
Mm-hmm.
went from a 6 figure job and all the safety in the world to
Yeah.
now complete like nothing. So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
shoot, like what am I gonna do? Um, and the cool, like long story short of like what happened with this is I believe it happened for a reason because
Yeah.
it actually gave me the fertile ground to discover and transition into the fear coaching. Because if I was
Mm.
just making money like that forever, I probably wouldn't have been motivated
Yeah.
to listen to like, so it guided me into like, hey, here's not only how to make money doing what you love, but here's how to, bring your medicine to the
Mm.
world. And of course, a great motivator is money through that channel.
Mm-hmm.
And so that loss of money is actually one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Mm. Such a powerful story, and it's like it pushed you into a rebirth, and almost like that healthy fear was a
Hmm.
good yeah, like the healthy fear was a good thing in the long
Yeah, I
run,
mean,
even though it felt uncomfortable, like highly uncomfortable at the time.
yeah, I mean, and I don't recommend that to everybody. It's like
Hmm.
because that will sometimes put you in too much fight or flight. Like what you said, right? Of like a
Yes.
healthy amount of fear. There's a difference
Mm.
between like, hey, I'm stretching my edge, I'm expanding out of my comfort zone versus like I can't even operate in this anymore. And
Yeah.
so, and that's really what I help people do, right? Is feel safe to explore their fear in a safe way.
Yeah, definitely. Because I agree. It's the same with how I work with clients as well. That we have to start from a place of understanding how regulated somebody is, because there's a lot of messages around like just do the thing,
Yeah.
just do the thing. and it's like just quit your job and travel the world or what or whatever it might be, which can be
Yeah.
amazing, and I'm sure you'd learn so much from it. But there's sometimes a maybe a just a lack of consideration a little bit around, you know yeah, where is somebody at, what's their resiliency level like,
Yes.
what's their capacity, what's their history with coping with things, where's their sort of trauma level at, and you can do things, I think, in a slower paced way and still have a powerful end result and a really, really beautiful transformation. It doesn't have to be like right now, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it really is both because I've worked with people who like, because that goes to the extreme, right? Of like, I'm gonna wait until things are perfect.
Yes, yeah.
It's like, no,
Which is a
like,
bit of freeze.
yeah, it's like, no,
Yeah.
you're it's just your fear. Like,
Mm.
procrastination is really just fear in disguise. It's like trying to protect you from, a negative outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's a complete balance, but like what you're saying is the nuance of you don't have to like go from A to Z in like one day.
Yes, exactly.
Right, is like you can work to that thing, and I think that's, as humans, we just think in so black and white, where it's just like, no, it's like it's a gradient,
Mm.
and you can like someone I'm working with right now, like it's been really cool to see them like just naturally saying yes to fear. Like our goal was like, okay, like leave your job within 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
and that's very possible. It's like it's happening, right? So it's not like, hey, quit your job tomorrow. Like I've
Yeah.
had definitely had some people where it's like we're all different, and that's sometimes the downside of like when you see one 60-second reel and someone's telling you to quit your job. Like I definitely tell people to do that, because it's like I know some people need to hear that,
Mm.
but it's like it doesn't have to be tomorrow. It's like, yeah, it could be over 6 months. It's
Yeah.
depending what is your season, what is your circumstance.
Yeah. But you're right that you've still got to face the fear.
Yes.
Yeah, because I totally hear what you're saying, that you can avoid it. You can avoid it for 20 years,
And people do
and
and longer.
yeah, yeah, the majority of people do, don't
Yeah, and
they?
that's
And yeah, like for me, the most liberating thing I ever did was face my darkest shadow, and to be honest, to be completely, fully honest, in spite of the immense fear that brought up in my body, and the fear it brought up in, okay, this honesty, this level of honesty could um lead to so many uh ends in my life. It could be the end of everything as I know it.
hmm
And it was not an easy journey, but it was the most liberating um decision that I ever made.
Do you mind sharing more? I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but I'd love to hear a little bit more.
Well, I had spent like so many years. I'd spent most of my childhood in secrecy, because there was so much, I guess, that it didn't feel safe be to give my opinion on things, or to show up in authenticity, to show up in authentic expression, to be sensual, to be expressive sexually, or to even talk about it. It was that real kind of, you've got to be this way, and that's it. And I very quickly developed secretive behaviors.
Mm,
So my whole life then, as I went into my 20s and my 30s, was a whole long string of secretive behaviors, because it was like that was just how I was functioning.
yep.
I didn't know anything different. So I was just stuck in this thing of like, okay, I can't be honest about how I feel about anything. And instead, I'll just cope with it by having kind of like a secret, like secret life a little bit, you know? So it then just felt like I held so much shame. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
held so much shame around things like, secrecy around how I felt about my body, and secrecy around food, and secrecy around, um, not being the most honest in relationship, and just so many pieces that all kind of amalgamated into one hot mess. And it was like I didn't know how to get out of it, and it was
Mm-hmm.
awful because I also felt then that I couldn't authentically communicate with other people, because it was like, well, nobody can see this like
Yes.
dark cloud that I'm carrying around with me. And so therefore I can't be myself. And it was so isolating and lonely, and really sad. I felt sad, but I couldn't express that sadness. So it was, I'm talking about it, and it makes me feel really kind of like, I just want to hold that version of me,
Mm-hmm.
because that was my inner child, you could say, my inner child that was just so vulnerable. And yeah, if I hadn't got to a stage of like, you know, being honest with the people that I love, then I would have carried on in that cycle, and it's dangerous. It really is. It's harmful to your mental health.
Yeah, well, first, like, thank you for sharing that. Like, I feel the power behind that. And what you just said at the end is really cool because why you don't share is because why? It's dangerous,
Yeah.
but you just said something really important of like, well, if you don't share, it's dangerous.
Yes.
Because people don't realize that, like, when you don't do the thing that you're afraid of, you're actually creating the exact circumstance you're trying to avoid,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's like you're trying to avoid pain, you're trying to avoid sadness, you're trying to avoid rejection and abandonment, right? So it's like, because as a kid, it's like, well, I can't be me.
Mm.
So, I mean, this is the classic human story of everybody, right? Because we come into this earth, people or circumstances or whatever tell us that who we are isn't enough or wrong or whatever. And so we begin to change that or hide that. And so now it's like, well, it's very scary to start being ourselves. But it's
Mm.
like, look, like if you don't start just, you don't like what you said of you didn't know how to do it. And I think sometimes we can get overwhelmed. And that's a symptom of fear too, of like feeling overwhelmed of, I don't know where to start. It's like, what, again, it's
Mm.
kind of like with quitting your job. It's like, you just don't go from like completely being shutting yourself down and shame to just completely like an awakened human the next day. It's like you just start with one small thing and that just like begins to snowball and like you gain momentum. But yeah, I just want to hit home for people of like whatever it is, right? If you're avoiding something, like at the end of the day, if you're not doing what you know and what you want to be doing, it's because you're afraid, right?
Mm.
You're afraid of a negative consequence. You're afraid of rejection, of judgment, of being seen, of that vulnerability, whatever.
Mm.
But if you don't do that thing, like you are creating the pain that you're trying to avoid. So it's
Yes.
like what you said of the deepest thing that you are afraid of is the greatest liberation.
Mm.
And one of my favorite quotes is the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Because it just
Mm.
says it so simply. I'm just like,
Yes.
oh, like to me it's so simple. Like, and I'm a
Mm.
pretty like logical person. So it's just like, oh, I totally get it. And this is what I got it even as a kid. I was
Yeah.
like, if I want to be free, if I want to be the most loving, if I want to be the most me and live the most enjoyable life, I've got to do the thing I'm afraid of. If
Yes.
not, my life will be limited. And so it's like to me, there's no other option.
Mm. Hmm. And I think the thing is that like when you're living in the space of fear, you can't see what's on the other side.
Correct.
So it's like you're just in this like dark hole, really, and you can't see the light. You can't see the light. You can't see the freedom and like there's so much possibility now that I
Hmm.
see every single day. in my life, and it's so awesome. It's so beautiful, it's so magical, and it's difficult when you're in that dark space, in that kind of hole of fear and stuckness and constriction, to see the way out, and b, yeah, what's on the other side. And that's part of it. It's like we're not taught about sitting with the discomfort of the unknown.
Hmm.
Like, nobody teaches you that at school, do they? Like, that these phases that you can go through in your life, where it's like you don't know what's coming, you don't know what's next, and it feels highly uncomfortable.
Yeah, and the funny thing is like that's the whole point.
Hmm.
And it became really clear to me when we had our first baby. It's like, and I've heard stories or metaphors like this before, but I finally understood it when we had our baby. Is like, right, like giving birth. Like a baby literally doesn't know what is on the other side.
Hmm.
Like, and this is one of my favorite examples because what is like when a uterus is contracting and expanding, like, opening and closing, that's what we feel in life every day.
Yes.
It's like it's like the oh, like this is so uncomfortable. It's that discomfort, and it's like,
Hmm.
oh, I feel so good. Yes, let's go. And it happens again and again, no matter how successful you are, because that's literally life guiding you, right?
Hmm.
To be reborn, to be birthed again and again and again and again. But it feels like shit, like on the other side, I don't know what that is. And
Yes.
so this is why I'm so passionate. And honestly, like I didn't know this before I stepped into this path, but I've just seen, yeah, like how liberating it is. Like,
Hmm.
because once you have the tool and you learn how to, befriend and work with and alchemize your fears, like
Yeah.
you pretty much become, I don't want to say invincible, but you become like, I'll say superhuman, like at least compared to your old self, because it's now you have the tool to
Hmm.
do everything that's been stopping you. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be discomfort or you're not going to make mistakes or whatever, but at least now you have the reference of, oh,
Yes.
I've gone through that dark tunnel and I've made it out the other side. So
Hmm.
now I know that I can do that again and again and again.
Yes, yeah. Especially when you've been to that darkest space, because it's like then the journey is easier. If you've been to that darkest space, the journey is, not to say that you're not going to get thrown things in life, but there's so many things then that feel easier in comparison. So, yeah, I would love to know, like, is there anything in your life at the moment that you feel like, what you're saying about, um if there is this fear, then you have to face it.
Hmm.
Do you feel like
Yeah.
that about anything in
Oh, for
life?
sure. Always. I just did one yesterday. Um, I won't be specific about what it is yet, but I'll
Mm-hmm.
tell like generally it was a conversation with my partner, Belle, and it was something that I was scared to tell her.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it was like, it was cool. It was just after we meditated. And I had been thinking about it for the past week because it's something that happened in the past that came up. And I was like, okay. And then I started to feel like this shame about it.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you have the thought of like not wanting to tell someone, that's how you know that you need to tell them the thing.
Yes. Yeah.
But first I needed to be honest with myself and like feel the feeling and the shame that was coming up
Mm.
and not rush it because it's such a fine thing, right? Of like, and I didn't want to because some people like they just want to like offload their
Yes.
stuff and just pour onto someone like, here, you carry it for me. It's like,
Yeah.
no, that's not what it's about, right? It's like I can carry and alchemize this myself, and this is really important that I, tell you and we can alchemize it together as well.
Mm.
So like honestly, yeah, like I started the conversation saying like I'm scared to tell you. And like I was like my nervous system was activated, but because I had sat with it,
Mm-hmm.
processed it, we just got done meditating and we have a history and all built trust, so it's like I can, you know, I guess ease my fear. And it's like I have the history of wins, so it's like I can
Mm-hmm.
look back and like this is gonna be okay. And it was actually really cool because after that conversation, it made me realize like a couple of years ago when we used to have like conversations like this, like I would get so triggered, like whether it was me or her.
Yeah.
And it's like I remember like there's been a few conversations where I've been like shivering in bed, which is
Mm.
just my fear, right? It's like my fear
Yeah.
protecting me. It's like this something's bad happening. Like, am I gonna get abandoned? Am I gonna get hurt? Da, da, da,
Mm.
like shivering and shaking. And it's just really cool to reflect back on those points of like, oh wow, like I really have grown so much and become much more grounded, much more
Mm.
confident, much more healed, and just like in my power. As of course, there's always more room to go. Like I see it and I feel it all the time. But that was just something yesterday that I was scared to share.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Hmm.
Like that's one of the biggest things I think is maybe not for everybody, but I think it comes up for a lot of people, just this honesty and communication with the people that you love, with your partner, with about the things that bring you shame and human things,
Yeah,
human feelings and human experiences that can feel bad or wrong. And actually they're just human. They're just like your humanness, aren't they? And yeah, but to like vocalize that and to vocalize it in, I love what you said about just like dumping, because that can happen as well, can't it? And it's like, yes, kind of navigating those feelings within yourself. I agree, before communicating it, so that it comes so that you're communicating it in the most grounded and loving, way that you can, amongst all the sensations that are arising in your body. It's not an easy thing to do, is it?
no, it takes so much practice. Like it's definitely because I mean, growing up, right? Like I definitely stayed quiet to like appease my mother. So it was like
Hmm.
doing this has been such like a practice. Like it always is and probably always will be. But it's
Hmm.
something I'm so committed to like definitely making it feel easier.
Yes,
And
definitely.
the only way it can feel easier is if I do it more.
Mm-hmm. When I got this tattoo on my throat, it's only like 2 or 3 weeks old,
Oh, wow.
and it really brought up a lot of unexpected fear.
Of just
About
getting the tattoo?
No, it wasn't about the pain, it wasn't about any of that, it was about the permanency. Yeah, it was about the permanency of it and the
Mm,
position that it was mainly around my mum and my father-in-law, and the older generation kind of parent figure parent figure judgments, and all the fear about rejection and abandonment and not being loved anymore, and all of that. It was so interesting, like, yeah.
I
And
love
all
it.
the somatic responses I was getting right up until the moment that they like did it.
Yeah, I mean that's what's so cool though. It's like I mean, honest I mean I imagine it's probably gonna happen for you the rest of your life, but it's definitely like it draws my attention. But it's like what I see from it is like there's definitely an energy to it. I'm not like what does
Yes.
it mean? Because like I feel I'm like there's definitely some stuff happening there.
Well, it's
Mhm.
like interesting that I felt called to do it in this part on my throat, because there's been so much stuck, I guess historically, around my
Mm,
voice, an expression of self, expression of voice, and all of those things. So it's like there. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, no, I feel it.
So, what do you suggest for like if somebody is sitting in this like intense fear, or sometimes people don't even like, if you're so disconnected and you've detached yourself so much, right? You don't even know that you're fearful. You don't even know that you're fearful because you're just accepting that this is how life is. That's also a stage, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
How do you like how do you move out of that stage from your perspective, and then how do you move from, it's like unconscious to conscious, how do you move from that stage and then
Mm,
conscious to actually doing something about it?
that's a great question. So for the first stage, I feel like I'll be honest, this stage has probably frustrated me the most
Mm.
because it's my job of like, how do I get people to know that they're afraid? And I'm like, that's not my job, right? Is like, and it has like it's been frustrating because like I take it personally. Like when people are like, but that's for my own stuff to work on. It's like when people say they're not afraid, I'm like, that's not true, but like I can't, and that's their fear protecting them, and so it's like
Mm.
for me just to know it's like, well, first of all, like we all are, like we're
Mm.
biological creatures like designed to feel fear. Like fear is a biological response in order to protect us. So the most simple way I like to just put it is like if, and I kind of said this earlier, just in a different way of like, if you ever like stop yourself from doing something that you want to due to a perceived negative consequence, then that in itself was a fearful response. So if it's like, I want to speak something, I want to tell someone, but I don't. I want to go for that
Yeah.
promotion, but I don't. I want
Mm.
to quit my job, but I don't. I want to start the business, but I don't. Like I want to get the tattoo and then I don't, right? It's like all these
Yeah.
different things that happen is like it's a fearful response. So it's just, okay, where am I not myself? Where am I not expressing
Yes.
fully me?
Mm.
Because that's really
Mm.
what fear is, and that's the beauty of honestly, like I'm freaking so passionate about this because like fear actually guides you into yourself. And so the
Mm.
more you stay away from it, right, the more we already talked about this, stuck and miserable you'll be.
Yeah.
Because it's like fear is revealing where you don't feel free, fear is revealing where you don't feel loved. And so it's a
Yes.
compass into your liberation of like,
Mm.
it doesn't mean you have to be obsessed and like always, digging into it because eventually it just turns into a natural practice of like, oh, I feel I'm resisting or I feel I'm hesitating. And it's like, okay, then that's the thing I must do.
Do you like ever feel like there's a fear that you don't want to do? So say for example, right? I kind of
Mm.
think sometimes maybe I should jump off of a plane. Out of a plane because it's something that I feel scared of. But it's like, okay, do I actually have an interest in jumping out of the
Yeah,
plane?
that's what I would
And
say is like,
and the same with plant medicines.
so when you said that, so my read is a different feeling. Plane, you don't care about, the plant medicines you do.
Yeah. It's quite difficult because there's hundreds of things that we're fearful of,
Yeah,
aren't there? And it's like distinguishing, I guess it's that bit of like recognizing what is deeply important and also what is externally influenced,
yeah. Well, I mean, one way
because
that I
there's a
would
lot
just
of
look,
that as well, you know?
yeah, I would just look at it like if you died, have not, like if you were on your deathbed, right, and you didn't skydive, would you care?
Hmm. Oh, I need to go and do it.
Same thing with plant medicine, is like would you regret having not done it? And it doesn't mean it needs to be right away or like force yourself into it. It's like I've had my own experience with plant medicine. Like I thought because I grew up so conservative and religious that like I've never even been drunk, So it's like
Mm.
my relationship with substances is much different, which I'm honestly so grateful for because I've never leaned on them.
Yes.
Like to me, it's like give me water, sun, workout, I'm
Yeah.
good, you know. And but what I learned is like I was judging other people doing it, which was my own fear protecting myself.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was, just a clue to look within myself. And it didn't mean I went and just did it right away, but I could tell when that message came in that it was time for me. And I
Mm-hmm.
was terrified. I can still remember like that moment, kind of like the tattoo, right? Of like, and it's like, yeah, it's like the point of no return
Yeah.
because it's like, I have no flipping idea what's about to happen. And it was so, of course, my fear. What is, I don't know if this is a quote, but if it is, I should make it right. Like, you know how when on cars on the side mirrors it says objects may be appear larger than they are or
Mm-hmm.
whatever?
Yeah.
That's the same thing with fear, right? Fear like magnifies things bigger than they actually are. So
Mm.
it's like because it's there to protect you, like we're hyper focusing on like all the bad things that can happen. Um, and so like I'm just bringing that reference in and context in for you. But yeah, like I'm trying to think of something that I wouldn't really care about doing, right? Like that I'm afraid of doing, but it's just like a preference. of like I don't need to
Yes.
do that thing. Like it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah.
Like eating like fear factor stuff of like eating bugs or whatever. Like
Hmm.
of course I'm scared of doing that, but it's like I was like I really don't care if I ever do that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's like I might not do it. Maybe one day it will, but to me that's just
Mm.
like a preference of like I honestly have like it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah. It is confusing though, isn't it? When like you're trying to decide whether to do something and there's so many things that come in. What are the things that tend to come in that you see with clients? What is the usual dialogue that comes in, around fear and not doing something?
Yeah, well, first off, I'll say before I forget, and I can give this to your people. So I actually have like a free training. It's about intuition.
Hmm.
So intuition versus fear. So it helps people tap into it's I've gotten some pretty cool responses about it. It's new, but a lot of
Hmm.
people have been responding some great things about it. So you can give that to your people. It's free.
I will.
And but typically like how fear shows up is like what we already talked about is like hesitating. It's a resistance feeling, it's a stuck feeling, it's a frustrated feeling.
Mm.
It's it's an overwhelming feeling, it's an overthinking feeling, it's a procrastinating feeling, it's an anger feeling, it's jealousy. Essentially it's like anything that isn't um love. And I
Mm.
actually believe fear is love in disguise. But it's like anything that
It is, yeah.
yeah, anything that's like and this can kind of be overwhelming too to really to think about. But stress and anxiety are essentially, fear because it's a stress and anxiety are our nervous system getting activated to protect us from a threat.
Mm.
And so it's like when we're anxiety, it's essentially we're just always in fear, but like all the time, just like in the background, like just like we're always
Mm.
looking like yeah, like anxious and like nervous about like what's happening. That's really just like because you're, afraid of something wrong, something going wrong. And so if you just begin to notice when, yeah, essentially you don't feel peaceful, you don't feel grounded, you don't feel calm, you don't feel yourself.
Hmm.
It's and obviously that can be a lot. So what I would just tell people to do is like go easy on yourself because there is going to be so much stuff you don't even realize that like oh like shit like I didn't even realize I was acting out of fear. And that's what happens when I work with clients or groups or whatever is like people start to realize how much they've been living in fear
Yeah,
because they didn't even
definitely.
know. And even
Mm.
people like you, like me, they're coaches or successful entrepreneurs, whatever, is like they didn't even know
Yeah.
how like this one behavior, this one habit was actually like a fear-based thing.
Mm.
So, and typically what happens is that can get really overwhelming, like a fear tornado, right? It's like, oh my God, like my whole life is based around this thing. Is like it's okay, like everyone is.
Mm.
And so just to be patient with yourself and allow that feeling to be there and just yeah, go step by step. Don't try and like uproot everything right away and like
Mm.
I'm gonna face everything right now. It's just like, what is the one thing? Is it the tattoo?
Yeah.
Is it the promotion?
Yeah.
Is it just speaking my truth to my partner? Like, what is just the one thing that you can go start being more brave about?
Mm. Definitely. I love that. I love this whole conversation. It's been quite activating actually as well.
Yeah, what do you feel?
There was that little bit where I was feeling like, okay, when you were asking me what all my stuff was about, it was this little piece that was like, should I be saying this?
Hmm.
So it made me just think like, okay, there's like a little bit there, that's still
Hmm.
holding fear.
Well, thank you for
And
even expressing that. That's cool.
yeah, and yes, and also just that piece around, what you said about feeling invincible. And I really feel like that is a word that resonates. And
Mm.
it sounds like, I don't know, like you're Superman or something, but
Yeah.
Superwoman. I really resonate with that word, you know,
Mm,
because you do feel like that. It's like, if I can do this, I can do anything, you know.
I love that.
And yeah, and just so much, I guess, like, just reflections on my own journey, just I guess the pride that I have of myself in facing those parts again and again, because it's a continuous journey,
Hmm.
you know. And yeah, celebration of everybody who is, to a celebration of you, Ben, and me, and anybody else that is, you know, doing that work, learning to sit with the discomfort, going after their soul dreams, and all of those things. It really isn't an easy, it's not an easy ride, you know?
Yeah, but like, what's the alternative?
Yeah, exactly.
Misery. Like, you're gonna live the rest of your life in like regret. It's
Mm,
like to me, it's like, yo, it's not gonna be easy either way. So pick the road that gives you what you want.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ben. Where can people get a hold of you if they want to
Mm.
work with you, if they want to check you out on Instagram or whatever?
Yeah, if you're feeling brave enough to dive to dive into the world. I mean, if you're listening this far, you already are. So yeah, Instagram is the Fear Guy. It's very easy to find. I have
Hmm.
a podcast. It's called The Fear Alchemist. And then if you go on Instagram, you can go to my link in bio. I do one-on-one sessions. I do group stuff. I do, long-term mentorship things. There's free things. I have a self-guided course. So I've really started to build out the ecosystem. So no
Mm.
matter where you are in your journey, it's like you kind of plop in. And like I said, just start with the one thing that feels
Yes.
exciting and scary for you. So you can begin, yeah, liberating yourself.
Mm. Thank you so much, Ben. I'll put all your details in the show notes so that people can find you.
Thank you for having me and thank you for sharing and being vulnerable too.
You're so welcome. That's okay.